One of the worst things about being a hardcore boxing fan is knowing and understanding things about the industry that most casual fans don't. It's something that can be incredibly frustrating, but at the same time quite liberating. One of the things that good hardcore boxing fans are often able to do is challenge popular narratives and opinions that are more or less perpetuated by the mainstream boxing media. Narratives that are manufactured to colour the general public's opinions on certain fighters, for better or worse. There are fighters who from early on in their careers are often supported and coddled by the establishment, and receive the type of treatment that other fighters don't, being given a pass for certain things that others would not. There are fighters whose entire legacy have been artificially boosted by corruption, propaganda and lies. Without a shadow of a doubt, one of the worst examples of this in recent years is the former super middleweight and light heavyweight champion Andre Ward. Andre Ward is one of the most hideous examples of how far corruption in boxing can go. A fighter with little to no actual talent or skill, as well as an entirely fake persona, and a legacy that, while almost forgotten about by the boxing public, is often praised to no end by the mainstream boxing media. Nordic Warrior here, hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome back to my retrospective boxing series. Today we're going to be talking about Andre Ward and doing a deep dive into his legacy and talking about what really happened in his career and how he should be remembered in boxing history. So Andre Ward turned professional in 2004 after being awarded the light heavyweight Olympic gold medal. It became clear very early on in Ward's career that he was pretty much destined for great things, being featured in showcase fights on several high-profile undercards in America, mostly against low-level opposition. Despite the massive amount of hype and promotion he received, he never resonated with American boxing fans in the early days due to his disgusting illegal tactics and his insufferably boring fighting style, something that pretty much personified his entire career right till the very end. The warning signs of corruption were seen very early on in his career, in his first ever test, taking place against the dangerous yet limited journeyman Darnell Boone. Ward was knocked down and badly hurt in the fourth round from an uppercut, and would likely have been stopped, if not for the referee who allowed Ward to illegally clinch and spoil his way to the final bell. The only other meaningful fight at that stage of his career came against the dangerous puncher Edison Miranda, who, while dangerous, had shown his limitations, being brutally knocked out by middleweight champions Arthur Abraham and Kelly Pavlik. Ward won the fight by unanimous decision in a pretty lackluster performance, with the fight being much closer than the official scorecard suggested. The win over Miranda, while making Ward a ranked contender, it left serious doubts about his ability to actually compete legitimately at world level. It was about this time that a new interesting concept was introduced into the super middleweight division, a tournament named the Super 6 World Boxing Classic. The way the tournament was advertised was meant to convince people that it was a way to force all the champions and top contenders in the division to fight each other, something that was severely missing in boxing at the time. And you felt at the time, if you were paying attention, that if the tournament was successful, it would likely be replicated in other weight divisions. In retrospect, of course, the tournament turned out to be a total farce, a failure of epic proportions that more or less made a complete mockery of everybody involved in it. It really was a joke. So despite being advertised as the best 6 super middleweights in the world, 2 of the champions at the time, IBF champ Lucien Bute and WBO champ Robert Stieglitz, were nowhere to be seen. In Bute's case, it was quite understandable since he was actually under contract with HBO at the time, Showtime's rival network, and was already scheduled to face the Mexican contender Labredo Andrade in Canada. But Stieglitz, on the other hand, who was perfectly available and willing to fight anybody in the division, wasn't even invited. Instead, you had the WBC champ Carl Froch and the WBA champ Mikkel Kessler. In addition to them, you had former middleweight champion Jermaine Taylor, who had lost 3 of his last 4 fights prior to entering the tournament, 2 of them by devastating knockout, and was clearly undersized and overmatched. You also had former middleweight champion Arthur Abraham, who, while undefeated, had yet to make his super middleweight debut. In addition to these guys, you had undefeated Olympic bronze medalist and ranked contender Andre Durrell, and of course the man himself, Andre Ward. It became very clear when the terms of the tournament were revealed exactly how it was going to go, and more to the point, who was going to be favoured. One of the conditions set out by the supposed rival promoters was that every single fighter in the tournament would have their chance to enjoy home advantage, but would have to travel at least once to their opponent's home territory. All except one, Andre Ward. Yes, despite Ward having little to no fans to speak of and being a significant betting outsider, with a laughable performance against Addison Miranda being his claim to fame at super middleweight, somehow the supposed rival promoters, as well as the Showtime organisers, agreed to allow Ward to have every single fight in his hometown during the first 3 stages of the tournament. It became clear to many of us at the time that the tournament was being set up to ensure Ward's victory at all cost. This was confirmed in his first fight of the tournament. Ward got a shot at the well-respected Danish WBA World Champion Mikko Kessler in his hometown of Oakland, where allegedly they had to give tickets away due to Ward's lack of popularity. In what was one of the most disgusting, despicable and flat-out disgraceful performances you will ever see in a boxing ring, Ward was allowed to constantly foul and spoil his way to victory. Ward opened numerous cuts on Kessler's face, doing serious damage that plagued him for the rest of his career, with blatantly intentional headbutts, while also being allowed to clinch excessively, hit on the break, and duck below the waist, breaking multiple rules of boxing, all the while being protected by the American referee Jack Reese. The ringside doctor called a halt to the fight late on, in what should have resulted in a disqualification victory for Kessler. Ward was instead awarded a technical unanimous decision victory, highlighting the high-level corruption that would foreshadow the rest of Ward's career. After the disgraceful victory over Kessler, Jermaine Taylor, who would be Ward's next opponent, pulled out of the tournament due to apparent brain damage, being then replaced by the severely weight-drained former light heavyweight contender Alan Green, in another despicable performance by Ward that I can only imagine bored the entire boxing world to sleep. Ward decided to lean on a visibly drained Green all night, winning an easy unanimous decision. It was an incredibly boring fight and a complete waste of time to watch. Ward then moved on to the 3rd stage of the tournament and was set to face his friend and former Olympic teammate Andre Dirrell. However, with Dirrell disgracing himself after faking a KO against Arthur Abraham in his home state to receive a disqualification victory, he pretty much realised that boxing wasn't for him and decided to temporarily retire, citing a brain injury, supposedly caused by his fake knockout. Ward was instead forced to take on the tough, durable and seasoned Australian-based Cameroonian Sakio Bika, once again in his hometown of Oakland. Bika was a tough contender, but one who had already failed at world level. It turned out to be the toughest fight of his career so far. At this point, it would have been hard to believe that Ward could produce a more disgusting performance than what was seen against Kessler, but against Bika he did just that. Ward committed so many blatant intentional fouls that I had never seen anything like it at the time. Not only did he excessively hold Bika all night, intentionally headbutt several times and even land numerous low blows, but he also deliberately elbowed Bika in the face on several occasions, which I can only assume was an attempt to blind his opponent. Despite all of Ward's cheating, the fight was actually very close and competitive, even with the referee once again protecting Ward all night. Despite this, the judges' scorecards for the fight were farcical, unanimously giving every single round to Ward. After controversially beating Bika, Ward then moved on to the semi-finals of the tournament, taking on the German-based Armenian Arthur Abraham. Once again, despite the fact that Ward had had every single fight of the tournament up until this point in his hometown, and Abraham had had to travel twice, the tournament organisers and promoters involved opted not to force Ward to travel to Germany, and instead once again gave Ward home advantage, as usual allowing him to fight in his home state. The fight was fairly competitive early on, with Abraham uncharacteristically starting very fast and coming out aggressively in the early rounds. But as the fight went on, Abraham's lack of stamina and Ward's superior size and speed, with the help of a few low blows and shots on the break, saw Ward to a fairly wide unanimous decision victory. Ward then moved on to the final of the tournament, taking on the WBC champion Carl Froch, who himself had seen his fair share of special treatment and hold-time corruption, but that's a story for another day. Froch repeatedly called Ward out for his cheating and his disgusting lack of sportsmanship in the build-up to the fight. This is ironic, of course, since Froch himself was a very dirty fighter, but I digress. The fight took place in December 2011, and it was a surprisingly clean performance from Ward. He dominated the fight from start to finish, and actually showed on that occasion at least he could actually box a little bit and fight legitimately when he needed to. So at least the victory over Froch he can lay claim to. After beating Froch for the WBA and WBC title unification, Showtime Sports, who had clearly backed Ward from the beginning of the tournament, falsely labelled Ward as the undisputed world champion at super middleweight, despite the fact that Lucien Bute and Robert Stieglitz were still champions at the time, and were both interested in fighting Ward. Ward had a long layoff, and the following year, after turning down every single dangerous contender at 168, refusing to fight any of the other champions, Ward was offered a chance to fight for the lineal light heavyweight championship against Chad Dawson. However, in a foolish move, Dawson half-heartedly said that he would consider moving down in weight for the fight. Ward, of course, being the self-entitled, cherry-picking coward he was, capitalised on that and refused to move up, demanding that Dawson move down to fight him. He also refused to fight anywhere but his hometown of Oakland, as usual. The fight took place in September 2012, and Dawson, who looked like a skeleton on the scales, managed to somehow make weight for the fight. He was reportedly even knocked out during sparring, and his punch resistance was gone. Despite being severely weight drained and fighting in Ward's hometown, Ward needed every single advantage he could get, intentionally cutting Dawson with a headbutt, and once again fouling and cheating his way to victory, this time by 10th round stoppage. During this time, Ward began to really show his dark side, violating his contract with his then longtime promoter and friend Dan Goossen, who had protected Ward and guided his career, despite Ward being box office poison due to his ugly style and cheating. While the dispute was ongoing, Ward spent over a year out of the ring, before coming back once again in Oakland taking on the relatively unknown fringe contender Edwin Rodriguez. Once again in a disgusting performance, Ward fouled, spoiled and cheated his way to victory in another incredibly boring fight. The following year, his promoter Dan Goossen sadly passed away, with many people feeling that the stress Ward had put him through had contributed to his failing condition. After about a year and a half of inactivity, and while avoiding fight offers from any serious contender at 168, Ward announced that he would be making a comeback, but could no longer make the 168-pound limit. He announced that he would be fighting the notorious British laughingstock Paul Smith, who had just taken a potentially career-ending beating and back-to-back losses to Arthur Abraham, and whose best victories were against domestic-level fighters in Liverpool. This rightfully received ridicule from hardcore boxing fans who were starting to really understand what Andre Ward was all about. Once again, the fight took place in Oakland, where else, predictably, Ward won the fight easily by stoppage. It was at that point that Ward entered into negotiations for a fight against the Russian knockout artist and undefeated unified light heavyweight champion Sergey Kovalev. Ward announced that he needed 2 tune-up fights first, both in, you guessed it, Oakland. First against the Cuban contender Sullivan Barrera. Ward was surprisingly deducted a point for one of his low blows, something that you would not have expected given his track record. Nonetheless, he won the fight by unanimous decision. He then took on some unknown Colombian bum, winning again by decision, before finally facing Kovalev in November 2016. Predictably, due to the massive gap in skill and ability between the two, Ward was utterly schooled and dominated for 12 rounds, being knocked down in round 2 and being thoroughly outboxed and outlanded throughout. Ward had to do a lot of cheating and spoiling just to make it the distance, and was of course predictably protected all night by an American referee. Despite clearly losing the fight and being outlanded in the vast majority of the rounds, the 3 corrupt American judges disgracefully awarded Ward the unanimous decision, in one of the worst robberies in boxing history, that disgusted many boxing fans. Due to the absolute disgust felt by boxing fans, HBO, who aired the fight, lost thousands of subscribers and faced a bit of a quiet boycott. The fight, like all of Ward's fights, was a massive financial failure, leading to the beginning of the end for HBO Boxing, who had invested a lot of money into promoting the fight and trying to build up Andre Ward. And despite this, they still had a rematch. As if the robbery in the first fight wasn't bad enough, the rematch was the final nail in the coffin for Ward's shameful career. In addition to once again hiring 3 corrupt American judges, This time they also appointed Ward's personal friend and known corrupt American referee Tony Weeks. This time, rather than try to spoil his way to a gift decision, Ward decided to target Kovalev below the belt, landing excessive low blows all night, while his personal friend Tony Weeks turned a blind eye. Then, in one of the most shocking things ever to take place in a boxing ring, after Ward let rip landing multiple consecutive low blows, Tony Weeks decided to stop the fight, awarding Ward a technical knockout victory, rather than disqualifying him like he should have. Ward was of course unapologetic in victory, proving himself to be both a narcissist and a vile human being, as well as a pathetic hypocrite. Ward retired shortly after, as the financial failure of the rematch not only destroyed any interest in Ward's career going forward, making him simply not viable for any promoter or network to ever feature again, but also led to the downfall of HBO boxing, which had been around for several decades. It may have also had something to do with the fact that there were several dangerous light heavyweight contenders, right on the verge of becoming his mandatory challenger, such as Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. And so tells the story of Andre Ward, a cheater, a coward, a narcissist, and a stain on the sport of boxing. Thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed making this video. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more retrospective boxing videos. I have a lot of them coming to the channel in the near future. Thanks for watching and God bless.